If you've ever been interested in digging deep into astrology, this episode is for you. We bring on my friend Natalie Walstein, the author of Your Cosmic Calling, and my personal astrologist who helps me map out my next moves in life, business, and even my relationships and where we're going to live or travel next. All of those things will be covered in this episode. We'll even dig into our charts individually and as a couple and how you can discover your life purpose with astrology. Hey, we're Britt and Chris Carmichael, and you're listening to the Elevated Life Podcast. Throughout the 13 years we've been together, we've never ceased in our endless quest to better ourselves.
We've studied top experts, philosophers, and gurus. After years of personal self-experimentation, we found the tools for shifting your beliefs, moving through fears, and developing a positive mindset.
If you're ready for a breakthrough, then you're in the right place because we're here to empower you to take control of your life with simple mindset shifts that create radical transformation.
We'll be diving into topics like personal growth, health, philosophy, spirituality, relationships, success, and mindfulness.
So create some space for yourself and get comfy. It's time to become the badass you were born to be. Well, hello, Natalie. We are so excited to have you on the Elevated Life Podcast to share all of your cosmic wisdom.
Thank you so much for having me. So happy to be here.
Yay! So Natalie and I met many moons ago on the IG, and her branding just caught my Libra eye in a hot flash. It was just so beautiful. But what I really love is that the wisdom that she shares from the cosmos actually aligns with what is happening in present time and in our own individual lives. So as a collective guide, she's able to help so many people from all walks of life. And I thought it would be so cool to share the wisdom of how astrology plays into knowing who you are, knowing what your purpose is, and how to show up and communicate and relate to other people that aren't your sign. So that's really what I wanted to dig into today, to let our elevators know that there's a bigger guide at hand. We don't just have to rely on our intuition, right?
Yes, it's already laid out for us like a map on our astrology chart. So if we get out of touch with our intuition or we aren't trusting it as much, it's like right there for you, which is amazing.
It's so helpful because I feel like so many times where we come to that chapter change in life, we need that extra clarity or guidance. And I know I've even come to you, birthday readings, like, okay, what's the next year of my life look like?
Yes, it's so helpful. It just kind of helps validate what you're already feeling and just gives you that extra push to just go for it and not sit around second guessing yourself.
So I've got to ask, how did you get started in this? Was it like a specific moment that happened? You're like, this is what I'm into. Have you always been into it? Like, what's the beginning of all this?
I never expected I would be doing this. I used to be a graphic designer, and then oh, nice. Yeah. And then my whole life fell apart all of a sudden. And my relationship went south. I was about to get married. I also got misdiagnosed with cancer. I was falling out of love with my career. Like everything kind of came to a standstill all of a sudden, which was really surprising because I was really following my dreams in life. And then it just like blew up. So I'm like, what did I do? But astrology is what helped me get back to myself and realize that everything was actually happening for me to lead me to a higher path. So I was just reading my horoscope every day, thinking to myself, when is everything going to get better? And it was so spot on and so, like I said, validating and comforting that I decided to dive deeper into it. I found out we have an entire astrology chart that goes so much deeper into who we really are, what we're here to do, and how to understand each other better as well. I loved reading the charts of my family and friends, and I feel like I just totally understand them now, which means I can be there for them in a better way too.
That's why I'm not friends with Scorpios.
Oh my gosh. It's funny because forever Britt was really into more woo-woo things, more astrology, more things like that than I was, tarot cards and everything. And then we ended up, and I just wasn't into it. It wasn't like I was like, no, that's wrong, but it wasn't one of the things that I naturally gravitated toward until we got this birthday book. She has this birthday book that's like overly specific about things. And I started doing something like similar to what you're talking about. And where I started looking at different people's birthdays and I was like, that's exactly the person. And like, that would not fit me. And so that was like, that sort of like my foot was in the door. And I was like, maybe Britt's onto something. Maybe I need to start looking into more of this. This is exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's super exciting. It's sometimes hard to know how to get started with it because it is really complicated and people spend years trying to master it. So I totally understand why people might want to run away from it. And that's why I feel like it's my calling to help like bring people back in with the pretty visuals and be like, no, this is fun. It's really powerful. It's worth taking the time to dive into.
I think that's why we get along so well, Natalie, because I did the same thing with Oracle cards. I thought this is my way of really tapping into intuition and building a relationship and a connection to my soul, but it's so intimidating to people. People are so terrified of divination tools or tarot cards, Oracle cards, that I thought if I make something so beautiful that it inspires them to pick it up, they'll at least stay consistent in their self-care ritual practices.
Yes, I love your deck so much, by the way.
Thank you. It just, pretty and sparkles and colors and all the things. It's so aligned. So speaking of being aligned, when you look back at your chart, when you were going through that transition, can you now map out by the stars? Like, oh, I actually see, even though I was doing what I was really good at and what I loved, there was something bigger for me, like that, because I'm in the same position. I've been a very successful hairdresser for 15 years and my soul is like, go talk to dead people, empower them to break free of fear. Like what? Like what? But I've been building this dream and this goal that I've wanted for so long, just like you, but I'm doing what I love. So why are you asking me to not do what I love? Can you look back and see there's a reference or a turning point?
Yes, absolutely. It was basically time for me to go through a major activation of my soul mission, which it was kind of downloaded to me in a psychic kind of way, which I was not expecting at all. I guess I've actually studied this in past lifetimes and it was just being reawakened. So it's a pretty intense experience, but at the same time, I had a signature that happens when you find your calling at the same time. And actually discovered it when it was happening for me. And it's something I use for my clients all the time now, where I won't go into like the technical aspect of it, but basically a certain planet moves into your career zone and you feel like everything's coming. Jupiter.
Jupiter. Okay, Jupiter.
I don't want to overwhelm people, but yeah, Jupiter is the planet.
All the details. Chris is an Aquarius, as you know, so all the knowledge, please.
Okay, I won't hold back. Cool. So yeah, Jupiter is the planet of growth and expansion, and it was moving into my career zone that literal week that I was getting really excited about astrology, and I actually asked myself, what if I just became an astrologer? And I felt so excited, like crazy excited, which was weird because I was really sick. So I was like, wow, there's something to this. So even though it was like really terrible, I later I found out I was meant to go through all of that. Like I had a near-death experience. It was like a really crazy time, and I'm so grateful for it now. It's really made me who I am, and it's allowed me to hold space for people in a way I wouldn't have been able to if I hadn't gone through so much darkness.
Being both life path number 11, we go through what they say is lots of really hard challenges so that you have more compassion and empathy to relate and be like radical teachers of enlightenment to the world. And we both had a near-death experience in 2012 that was the kickstart for us to go, oh, hey, like, I think there's something bigger. We're supposed to be doing something with ourselves personally, but then translating that and helping the world. So,
it always feels like the traumatic experiences that we go through are just something to aid us. And like you were mentioning, it almost always just like nudges us back on our path, because like, had we not had specific certain things happen, we just wouldn't have done it. We would have stayed doing the same things we were always doing. We wouldn't have searched for anything different. And I feel like in that search for meaning, in that search for truth, in sort of like figuring out and doing that self-discovery of like, who am I? What am I here for? Like, does this have any kind of meaning or relevance? Like, that's where you would find so much of life. And I feel like too many people push away difficult things, obstacles, problems, challenges. And like, if we just learn to embrace them a little bit, like they're really what's helping and guiding us. Like, it's really those things that move us forward. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's definitely not comfortable when you're going through it. But just to remember, if you are going through a really hard time, there's always the darkest times before the lightest times. And it just means you're meant for so much more when you're going through that.
Well, I'm curious to see what 2022 has in store, because this year was a doozy in our
Yes.
personal life. So I'm curious where the hell Jupiter is in both of our planets, or both of our charts. But I just think it's so beautiful, talking about the struggles being a part of this experience. Because if we're talking about astrology, when squares happen with the different planets, that's a challenge, and challenges are meant for growth. So if we can stop avoiding the hard stuff, then we can just step right into the wisdom. And I think it would feel so much easier to not try to control it to be perfect all the time, but really to just be what it, in Zen philosophy, they say to accept what is to end suffering. And I feel like what we haven't really been told, the truth of what we haven't been told, is that suffering is built into the expansion of your spiritual journey. And you can put an end to that, but ultimately it's what motivates you to make those changes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It triggers you to want more and do more for yourself.
Yeah. So tell me more about when you're reading charts for people. Like you said, you're an expert at reading relationship charts, like couple charts. So what is something that you look for when you're comparing charts in couples?
I like to put them on top of each other just to see how different planets interact. Yeah. Whoop, whoop. So the thing with the relationship reading is I'm never going to be like, oh, you shouldn't be together or you should be together. It's more about laying out the different, basically the different circumstances that you're going to be facing with each other. And then you can ask yourself, do I want to deal with this? Is it worth it or not? So I'll never make that decision for anybody. But basically what I'm laying out in a relationship chart, as opposed to a career reading, which is actually kind of my main expertise. But with relationships, I'm looking for your moon sign is your emotional needs, so that you feel comfortable in the relationship, so you feel nurtured and nourished and protected and cared for. It's kind of like your love language in a way. And then your Venus sign is also important because it's what you're drawn to, what you're attracted to, what you magnetize towards you. And then Mars sign is kind of like your sexual pursuit that you're on, like what turns you on. So whether you're like a man or a woman, I think they're both really important.
Oh, one time we bought a sextrology book to like compare our zodiac and like, what does he need in the bedroom and what do I need as a Libra woman and an Aquarius man? Like, very fascinating. Like that there's a different language for that too.
Yeah, it definitely brought us, it's eye-opening because I feel like a lot of times we're always missing a little bit of something. And I don't know if it's like a hidden in the shadows or what the deal is, but it's almost like we have blinders on and we're like too focused on, but definitely with astrology and things like that, I feel like it's opened my view of like, hey, there's a little bit something that you haven't been paying attention to that you need to, something you need to focus on, or maybe something I need to focus on with Britt or just in our lives in some way. That's really fascinating that all the planets sort of represent something different, like talking about Mars, talking about the moon. That's wow.
We're getting them into the woo-woo
I know,
side.
I'm excited. I'm curious.
Love it. Yeah, I can see on your chart that it's actually a good study for you if you feel drawn to it, because it's a way of doing shadow work. And I won't go super deep into it, but your sun's in your 8th house of shadow work. So you're really interested in like diving deep into the core of why things are the way they are. And astrology actually gives us the answers to that, which is amazing.
We went to a psychic in 2012 that told Chris, you need to get back into hypnosis, specifically past life regression. And so I was the guinea pig for many years. And now I understand and I can see how this all correlates, because when you go back to past lives, you're going back to trauma.
Always.
You're going back to trauma that's still affecting you subconsciously in this lifetime. So shadows. You're the shadow man. You're the shadow man. I love it. Yeah. It's so true. You've been doing that since birth. I mean, since you were birthed to the parents that you chose, to try to figure out how to help them and why they're so crazy.
All right. Something I'm also curious about. Have you come up against any kind of resistance? Like when you reveal something to someone, do you ever come up against resistance where they either, no, that's not for me, even though that they know that it is inside?
Oh, you're talking about me.
No, I'm not. I'm talking about everybody.
Every time you say, oh, Britt, I see this vision for you, I'm like, no,
every
never.
Time. That does happen every single time. Every time.
Actually, for the most part, no. People are pretty much amazed by how eerie it is. by how accurate it is. So if they're confused about it, it could be that they just haven't explored that side of themselves. Self-awareness is a really big piece of this. So if you haven't done a lot of soul searching work, then it might not resonate with you as much, but it's still there. It's just kind of buried under more layers.
Yeah.
Oh man, I love that. So speaking of figuring out who you are and doing the self-discovery work, obviously looking into your chart is a really clear path as to, who you are, what you're here for. When you're looking into people's charts, do you, I guess the question really is, do you feel like when you're looking into people's charts, there really is an actual blueprint of like, you're not on your right path here, like, here's what you could be doing? Or is it a general like, oh, for example, when I went to the first time I had an astrology reading, she was like, oh, double Pisces, you need to be studying like higher knowledge and higher learning. I'm like, well, I'm learning psychic mediumship. She's like, yes, that's it. So like, are there like actual specific clues, or is it just like, well, Jupiter represents this, you kind of have to intuitively figure out what that thing is? Because everyone's always asking me this in my coaching, what's my purpose? So how can you use astrology to figure out what your purpose is?
Yeah, I think there is definitely a sense of being on the right track or being on the wrong track, but you're going to feel that. So it's never going to be a surprise if I tell someone, sorry, you're in the wrong job. They're coming to me because they know they're in the wrong job. So it's never going to be super shocking. It's like just validating. But as far as the specifics of reading a chart to find your calling go, they're energies. So it's not going to say you're here to be a lawyer, you're here to be a painter. It would say you really like balance and fairness and beauty and harmony. But there's so many points on your chart that can help you nail down, but how to do that, which way to do that. So sometimes people will not understand their calling even after a full session with me, but I will give them tips on things to explore, to try it out and find it for themselves, which I think is kind of nice. It would be kind of boring if someone's like, oh, here's your whole life, here's what you're going to do. Okay, go do it. It's kind of fun to explore it for yourself.
That's how I feel about psychic mediumship is like, could I look into a lot of it? Yeah. Like, for example, we did a hypnosis session with Chris and he took me to the Akashic records and he's like, okay, open it up and explore. I walked up to the book. I closed it down so fast and said, no, I don't want to know. It wouldn't be fun. And so I found that to be a really interesting response, that's what my soul was doing. It wasn't like my brain was like, I want to know. Like my soul was like, no, let's just keep it a mystery. Let's keep it, a little air of surprise.
Yeah, it's almost like it's nice to have a few hints along the way, but we don't need to have the full path explained. It would be boring. Life would totally just be meaningless at that point. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, someone actually told me when I'm going to meet my soulmate and how and what he's going to look like. And I was really like excited at first, but then I felt kind of sad for a while. I'm like, oh no, it's not a surprise anymore. It hasn't happened yet, but it's supposed to happen next year. So we'll see.
Okay.
Big year for you.
We'll see what happens. So your mystery partner's coming in and you've also birthed a book. So I'd love to ask, how did that come into play? Like what made you feel called to create The Cosmic Calling?
Yeah, so I always wanted to write a book. I would actually hang out at the bookstore all the time when I was in high school, but I never knew what I would even write about. That's why I went into graphic design, so I can design other people's content. But when I discovered astrology, I have unlimited ideas. Like I could go for hundreds of podcast episodes and classes, of which I do. And I never run out of things to talk about. So I think when I was 28, I had just moved back in with my parents, leaving that situation where everything fell apart. And I was thinking to myself, how can I avoid someone else going through what I went through, where I felt really terrified that I was going to die with my magic still inside me? There was so much more I wanted to do. So that's when I thought of writing the book, was on my 28th birthday, I think. And I'm 31 now. By the time my book comes out, I'll almost be 32. So it's been a really long process. And looking back, I would not have been ready to write the book until I did. Going through a publisher is like I don't want to say it's hard. It's worth it for sure, but there's like a lot of hoops to jump through and a lot of paperwork and deadlines and a lot of stress, which I wasn't ready for until it happened.
Yeah. It's so true that sometimes we have these big dreams and these big ideas and we're like, I want it now. But if it all landed in your lap, like, do you have the infrastructure, the energy, the capacity to be able to show up and perform? And I look back at all the creations that we've had in our life, and it's taken a lot longer than our mind wanted it to, but it really aligns with what what we had to give. You only can create how much you have capacity for, so I love that you've given it time to like birth itself. Do you see any more books in your future?
Yes, I love writing books. I really want to write so many more for sure.
So what's the main premise behind this new book that you've created? Like, what, obviously you wanted to share your magic. Is it for beginners who are looking to read their own chart? Like, who is this book perfect for?
Yeah, so it's called Find Your Cosmic Calling, a guide to discovering your life's work with astrology. And it's for pretty much anyone, but I think beginners will really especially enjoy it because it's really beautiful and really simple. So it walks you through how to look up your astrology chart, how to read every single point on your chart, and get a sense of what you're really here to do and how to do it too. There's like good advice in there as far as going about it.
I love that. So as an expert astrology chart reader, if I were to just like which I know you're looking at our charts, but if I was just to hand you my chart, anybody's chart, what's the first thing you specifically look at that you're curious about? Not necessarily like I need to give them information about themselves, but like you as an expert, what do you look into? What are your curiosities when reading a chart?
I get so excited to read a chart because to me it shows your greatest potential, and I love waking someone up to what they're capable of. We really, really don't honor ourselves as much as we should. We really don't believe in ourselves as much as we should or could. And sometimes, like, to read your whole chart, it can be daunting because you realize like all the big things you're here to do, but you were born to do them for a reason because you're capable of it. So I really look at the chart as a whole, but I might like quickly glance upon like areas where there's a lot of activity. But I do have like a set formula I go through when I do actually read the chart, going from like the most important to maybe some of the lesser points. Although even what I call a lesser point, it could be really, really deep. It's just that I'm like preparing you for it.
Is there ever a time where you look at a chart and you don't go through your perfect formula of this is what I look at, this is what I go to next? Like, do you ever just look at a chart and you're like, whoa, what in the hell is going on? Like, this is wild. Have you ever been like blown away by like a unique chart, or is it all kind of like, oh, okay, like just different puzzle pieces moved around?
Oh yeah, yeah. It kind of depends on what I'm looking at it for. If I'm in a session, then I go through the structure. But yeah, if I'm just pulling up a chart, I'm like, oh wow, what am I drawn to? What's exciting? I find them all really exciting.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So if you were to read someone's chart and they had like, okay, scratch that. I'm thinking back to like, okay, I've had a reading with you. I kind of know like what it feels like and all of that. Can we talk a little bit about astrocartography? Like when you read their chart, not only are you talking about their cosmic calling, you can talk about relationships, but what are other things that you can dive into like astrocartography? What are all the different areas that you can use to learn more about yourself?
Oh my goodness, it's so limitless. Astrocartography is amazing because it helps you figure out where you want to live or travel for work or just happiness or even for love. If you wanted to meet someone, you can find your love line. But I also teach a lot of forecasting and planning with astrology,
Okay.
which I love because it helps keep you from burning out by working with your own natural rhythm and the rhythm of the current location of the moon and the planets. It kind of helps you slow down and give yourself a break so you don't feel like you always have to be on all the time. So that's another area I'm really passionate about.
So is that something someone could hire you, which AKA I'm talking about me, like to sit down and like before the years starts and like, okay, let's forecast Q1. And that way I know I can take a break on the first week of February and I don't have to be working all the time. Like, is that something that you actually offer, or is that something that you could learn how to do for yourself through your book?
Yeah, so I offer yearly forecasting reports on my website. So you can get a report made and it has like all the major events that are happening for you this year and what your focus is meant to be every month and times to rest, like you said. So that's a really great resource. But I also teach it. I have a membership where I teach astrology for the people who like actually want to know how I do things and then maybe even want to use it for other people or just for fun for themselves rather than having someone just like tell them.
Right, and you mentioned astrocartography.
Yeah.
Can you explain a little more about what that is and like what that entails for a person who has
Yeah.
never heard of that before?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so cool. So basically, you get a map of the world, and there's lines running across it based on the location of the planets when you were born. And it runs over certain areas. So certain areas are going to be like really negative and challenging, and certain areas are going to be really light and easy. Or some places are neutral. Most places are neutral because there won't be lines running over them. But like I used to live on the big island of Hawaii, and that was actually a really negative place for me, but it really triggered me to transform my life. So even though I'm calling it negative, it doesn't mean like bad. It means you're going to grow a lot and really fast, and it might not be very comfortable.
Yeah,
Lessons are involved. Yeah, I remember when you ran my chart, there was a huge line going through Dallas, which makes sense because we've been here our whole lives. There was a line going through the west side of Colorado, which is where I was interested in moving, but it was squared. So you said it would be good for you, but it would be challenging. And every time we go to Colorado, we almost die. So it's like, okay, like literally every time. But I love going back for like some crazy soul reason. And then there was another major line on Maui, which is what we were talking about. It's like, I want to come visit you, and I think I need to live in the islands. So I'd be curious to see like that come full circle.
Do you feel like there are when you're dealing with people who are, let's say, more spiritual, more into woo-woo type stuff, do you find that their charts seem to line up in some of the same places? Like, do you feel like a lot of them gravitate towards places like Hawaii, or maybe places in the mountains or certain oceans or something like that? Do people have certain overlaps where you notice like there's a pattern here? These kinds of people are doing these kinds of things.
That's super interesting. I think deep down we're all kind of spiritual. It's just kind of how aware you are of it. I haven't really noticed that necessarily, but I have noticed here in Hawaii, if you ask people why did they move here, they're like, I don't know. I was just called here. Like for me, I dreamt about it every night for a whole year, and I was like, stop, I can't move there. And then I ended up moving here, and I'm like, why did I think I couldn't move here? And it feels really aligned.
I think dreams also have a huge role in helping you navigate your path. It's like unconscious patterns and clues to pay attention to. A whole year, every night.
Hmm.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Okay. So what questions do you have? Because I'm talking about full moons and new moons. I do my gatherings. Like I'm all about the moons and the planets and that. But what questions do you have? Like since you have to live with me.
Well, since you talked about pulling up our chart, can you talk maybe about like some things about Britt? I'm curious to like what kind of information you're able to get, because I've never seen a chart before, so this is very new to me, and I know you're always dealing with it. So I'm curious like the kinds of information, just so I know better about what we're talking about.
Yes, so I'll just kind of break down the main parts of the chart. So for Brit, you are a Libra sun, and your sun's in your seventh house of relationships. So this focus that you've been leaning into around relationships is perfect. It's amazing. And it also explains why you've been doing so much one-on-one work as well, kind of like working individually with people to help them feel more aligned, which is a big theme for Libra, and balanced. And then Brit, your moon is in Pisces. It's actually super close to my moon, so I think that's why we like a lot of the same things. Your moon is your emotional landscape, so it's what makes you happy and fulfilled. And being in Pisces in the 12th house of spirituality, it is really all about tapping into the bigger picture and what's really going on, and being in tune with your real dreams and what you really want deep down on that soul level, rather than just like surface level focus. But the thing is, you can incorporate them both, because Libra can be a little bit more about the surface, like looking good and feeling good. So you're both of these at the same time. So you can like be there for people, help them look and feel good, but then really it's actually changing them on a soul level too, and empowering them.
Does that not just like blow your mind?
It's you.
Because in the salon, I have a mantra. It's I create beautiful hair and beautiful hearts. And it just started with the outside. But when I realized that I could create the most amazing, stunning looks and colors and styles on women, but if they hated themselves, like they wouldn't even see what I just created on the outside. So I shifted to create Shine School based on the conversations I was having for years with clients about self-love and empowering themselves and believing in themselves. And that's when I realized a woman shines so much brighter people in general, but I work with women. So women shine so much brighter when they love themselves, not just when they look good, but when you can do both, girl, my Libra ass is happy, you know?
Yeah, and that's often a product. Like you want to take that time to go get your hair done and take care of yourself when you love yourself too.
I love that. And can you talk about, everybody knows the basic sun sign, like everyone knows what their sun sign is, but not a lot of people know about moon and rising and hell. All the other planets also represent stuff, but the three common ones I would say are the sun, moon, and rising, right?
Yes, for sure. Yeah, they're really like the most important. So if you're overwhelmed by astrology, you could just like start there and you'd get so much out of it.
Mm, I love that. And then my rising is also Pisces.
Yes, and you have Jupiter really close to your rising sign. So you're just like so optimistic and excitable, and you put people in a good mood just being who you are, which is so beautiful.
So is the moon and the rising also both related to your birthday? Is that the it's
Yes,
also
everything on your
okay.
chart is basically like imagine Earth is in the middle of the chart and you're looking out at the sky. So this is where you would see everything in the sky. But the rising sign's actually based on the horizon that the sun
Okay.
is rising from.
Wow. And then yours.
Yes.
Okay, yes. So for Chris, you are Aquarius sun in the eighth house of business, finance, and shadow work. So you're definitely somebody who doesn't like being told what to do. You would rather be in charge of your projects, and you work the best when you are too. You're also really interested in moving the world forward into the future in a better and improved way. You don't want to just settle for how things are. You're looking for how it can be improved. So that's your sun. Your sun is what fires you up the most creatively. So it's definitely the most important part of your chart. And then your moon sign, your emotional landscape is in Leo in your second house of values, desires, and goal setting. So you're very goal driven. You always want to know what you want and what you're working towards. And you also have a lot of fun helping other people tap into what they want and get excited about believing they can have it. Really bringing out the best in other people is a big trait for Leo.
I think you've done that for me.
Yeah, I mean, this is what
yeah.
I mentioned this, and we were getting in the car this week, and I said, my gift is getting people excited about their gifts.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, it's really like, here's how I'm shining, and you can too. Here's how.
And then the rising one.
And then your Cancer rising, which is really lovely because Aquarius and Leo, they're kind of like, they're very fixed signs, which means it's like, this is what I'm going to do, this is how I'm going to do it. But then you have Cancer rising, which is much more accommodating to other people's needs and feelings. So you can be very nourishing and protective over people that you care about. And it's really about like holding space for someone to express how they're feeling so that they can feel more comfortable and in tune with themselves, and then go out into the world and shine as their best selves.
It's so true. When I first met Chris, he said, true love is investing in another spiritual growth. So cute.
Love it.
So when you look at a chart, is there anywhere where you're like, oh snap, here's what, like, is there something that happens where you're like, Mayday, this is what you need to be aware of? Are there ever like warning signs on charts for people to be aware of?
I think it just depends on where you're feeling out of alignment. So I always start my sessions asking, what do you want to get from this session? What's going on for you? What are your goals? And then I would use that information to help you know what to be aware of in your chart. Nothing's like inherently bad. Like that's my philosophy anyway. There's a lot of astrologers who are really into the doom and gloom, but that's not my style. But for me, Mayday would be like, oh my gosh, you have so many planets here. You have like a really big focus on like helping people tap into their roots and how they became who they are, and it lights up the world in pure magic for you, and you can help people understand like how they've become who they are so that they can break out of it and become more realigned with who they want to be too.
This is fascinating.
I told you.
This is fascinating.
Some real shit. Like some shit's happening. Is there anything else that you see on either one of our charts that you're like, hey, this is cool, pay attention to this?
Yeah, when I put your charts on top of each other, it's really amazing because usually Leo moon and Pisces moon, there can be like some adjustments you need to make because they're such different signs. But Chris, you have your Mars really close to Brit's sun. So you're motivated and like turned on by her as a person, which
True.
I thought was really cool.
Bingo.
Yep.
Yeah, and then also, Chris, your Mercury is your mindset and what you like to think about and what you like to talk about is aligned with Brit's Mars. So you like to talk about her passions and what she's excited about too, which for her is to really make a big difference in her community.
Okay.
Everyone should go get a reading.
I was
Like
gonna
everyone should
say,
stop everything they're doing and go just, I mean, I feel like this is so much information, especially as a couple, because I mean, everything you said obviously is absolutely true. But I think that being a couple and understanding where your partner is at and understanding like what motivates them, what gets them excited, what's going to trigger them, I think that's so helpful, because otherwise I feel like a lot of times, especially as a guy, in trying to understand a female, it's hard. I mean, we're just different. And so I think that being able to realize some of these things, I think as a couple is extremely powerful, not just as an individual, because this is cool to know as an individual, but I think it benefits, at least for me, even more because we're together. And like it interests me more to understand what she's going through so that I can better help serve and,
do that thing
that's what I meant. That's what I'm into. I mean, but I think a lot of couples should be looking more into this, because I think a lot of times maybe there's something about our partner that we don't perfectly understand, and looking at a chart or having someone be able to read a chart for us would allow us to be like, oh, that's why that's that way. Okay, and now I know what to do, and you can understand it a little better. This is awesome.
Yeah, it's also really helpful if you really are thinking about leaving someone, but you don't have the heart to do it. Like for me, that's how it helped me, is I saw my chart against my partner's chart and I realized like there are certain things about him that were never going to change. And I asked myself, is that okay with me? And I realized, no, it's not. Or sometimes our relationships, they prefer us as our old selves rather than who we're growing into. So that can be tough as well. It doesn't mean your relationship has to end, but it's just helpful to be aware of the different factors, especially when you're trying to make a big decision.
I see that a lot in my coaching and tarot readings, is that the women that I'm attracting are at turning points to transition into a higher level of awareness and magic and reclaiming their power. And a lot of the times their partners aren't willing to make that chapter change with them. And so a majority of my readings do end in, it's probably time to carry on. You know what I mean? Like, so it's interesting that they could use this as another way to just be like, see, like you don't, here's cards, here's charts, here's all in your heart even, because it's like sometimes hard to trust your own heart when emotions like that of love and relationships are involved.
Yeah, it doesn't mean it's not still going to be hard to go through it, but at least you're really clear about what you need to do.
Yeah. What are you thinking? How are you taking all this in?
I'm just kind of blown away by the overlap in ours and how we line up in so many different ways. And I think that when you're picking a partner, especially when you think about a forever partner, I mean, obviously it's different if you want somebody to be with you short term, but I mean, Britt and I are in business together, we're in a relationship together. It's like so much of our lives overlap also, not just, and it's incredible that if you would be able to look at these, you would get a sense of who that person was earlier on. Because I feel like had I known that like these things are like possibilities, and then we may have mapped out things slightly different, maybe not spent so much time doing certain things that we knew weren't in alignment, but we just in the moment, it sounded good, but I love it.
It's so
Yeah. I think like you can never really be on the wrong path though. Sometimes we need to do the quote unquote wrong thing for a while. Like even though like if you're doing something for 3 years, it could seem like you're spending so much time doing the wrong thing, but that's really not a lot of time in the grand scheme of things. And it really helps cement the lesson for you. Like, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. And now I know why.
I love that. So what is something else? So once you've looked at the 3 things that like your rising, your moon, and your all of that, like what's the next thing you like to go into? If you don't have a general direction, like from here, where would you go?
Well, the typical thing I would do is go to your Mercury sign next, because that's the next planet and it's like your mindset and what you like to think about. So that's really helpful, especially if you're trying to nail down, how to communicate better with somebody else, or also like what to talk about in a business. If you run a business, it has a lot of different uses, but that's really helpful. especially if you're like trying to have a conversation with someone, because we have different styles of talking and sharing.
It's so funny. We just taught in the Elevated Life Club on the intimacy masterclass, the 3 different ways to communicate. And even just that, whether you're visual or kinesthetic or auditory, even just that in itself, like that's not even the chart. That's not your human design. That's not your this and that. And like, that's just one little piece that could make for so much more harmony in relationships.
Yeah, it's really a key piece is being able to talk about how you feel and what you want, for sure.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any other questions you have on these charts, like reading them or?
I mean, it still looks a little bit like hieroglyphics to me.
I mean, I'm just staring at all these lines and colors and like, whoa, this is wild.
You talked a little bit about the location specific things. Is that same kind of charts, like where it draws over the world map? Is that something that's different?
I actually use a different program for that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it looks like a whole world with all the lines, and it looks like the planets are raining down on it or something. Yeah,
okay.
It's so cool.
I'm trying to visualize.
I was gonna say I'll have to pull my old one up and show you like where we need to move next, where we're moving in January.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Or just or where to travel. Yeah.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Traveling. So how do you know, how could you tell by reading a chart, like where are good places to travel for yourself?
There'd be positive planets or what are called aspects, which is like the relationship that planets have with each other. So like Venus is great for love, but something to keep in mind is like if you fall in love with someone on a Venus line and then you move off of that Venus line, your relationship might change. So that's something to keep in mind. Jupiter is an amazing line because you feel really excited and optimistic, but you can also make mistakes because you're so excited. So there is kind of like still a positive and negative to even like every planet, even if it seems really positive. I would definitely avoid a Pluto line unless you want to have a near-death experience or have like really big challenges in life. But again, you will grow and you will evolve so much faster in a place like that.
So Pluto is who to be on the lookout for.
Yeah, Lord of the Underworld.
Oh my gosh. So what does it look like for you? Since you said there's so many different areas and topics to talk about on your podcast, it's unlimited. What's that next curiosity or exploration within astrology for you personally?
Yeah, I've actually been really getting into Vedic astrology, which is like the Hindu version of it. Mm-hmm. It's really different, but I feel like in like the Indian Vedic culture, they're more like interested in enlightenment than we are here. Most people are like, how can I make more money and, have more success? And that's amazing. I love to help with those things, but I've kind of like added an extra tool to my tool belt for people who are feeling really overwhelmed by this like modern world and want to have more of like a holy type existence. So I use that to kind of like help people break out of the Western mentality of like go, go, go and hustle and kind of like tap into an aspect of your higher self.
I want that chart.
I know.
Like, that's what I care about. So like, how is Vedic astrology different? Is it because they're in a different location on the planet, so things are mapped differently, or is it a totally different system in general?
Yeah, exactly. So on a Vedic chart, your planets will move back about 25 degrees. So for example, Britt, you are a Libra technically, but you would be you would be a Scorpio.
Cancel that.
I'm out.
We're not going.
Oh, I'm sorry, Virgo. Sorry. But
even worse.
I will say it's really interesting that you have like an aversion to Scorpio because you have your Venus in Scorpio, so you actually like Scorpio themes. And your Mercury's in Scorpio, so you like to talk about Scorpio subjects, which is like diving deep to the core of what's really going on here. But you also have Pluto there, so it's like a fear of yours to like face the true core of things at the same time. So it's interesting how like sometimes we're afraid of a sign or we don't like them, but actually like sometimes they're a part of us.
Well, to be honest, the last 3 friendships that have ended in my life have been Scorpios with bad mom relationships, like terrible mother relationships. And my mom is a Scorpio. So I'm like, if you're going to be a Scorpio in my life, you have to love your mom. So I don't really know what all that means. But that's my new updated life rule.
Yeah, I actually think there's a lot to be said about that because your mom teaches you how to nurture yourself and care for yourself and give you what you need, or at least that's the archetype. And so, like, if you don't have that inside of yourself, regardless of your relationship with your mom, then how are you going to take care of other people, you know?
They don't, they just sting them and leave.
Yeah.
There's probably going to be Scorpios listening to this, so I will say
We
you
love
are
you.
a really cool sign and you have your place in the world. But yeah, sometimes you guys can rub the rest of us the wrong way.
And they should know that. I mean, like they should know that, you know, like I feel like you should be familiar enough with your sign, even somebody like me who doesn't know all, you know, this is more foreign to me than most things. But like I know what like an Aquarius typically does and what they stand for. And I know we can be a little pushy in certain regards and be a little bit rebellious in our attitudes. So I mean, like I feel like the Scorpios would know. They're like, yeah, we do that sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of
Yeah,
fun. Yeah, we
that's the
sting.
whole
Okay.
thing. Their job is to help us face our fears. So, like, check.
They're going to be
You're doing
trigger
it.
points.
Yeah. Which I mean, again, it's the same as like you're saying earlier. It's not always, it's not good or bad. It's just that some things are more challenging than others. Like that's the big difference.
Yep, and they're much more comfortable with uncomfortable subjects than any other sign,
I do love
which
your
is good. We need that in the world.
Yeah, we do. We need those vulnerable truth topics, like to have those. Back to my thing, I like those deep, real conversations. So that's so fascinating. I really appreciate you sharing some of this wisdom, looking into our charts. I think it's really fascinating, and I hope our listeners are even more excited to dig into this tool because honestly, when we were in Colorado, the first time we ever went to Colorado and had our near-death experience, I was recommended the book Star Signs by Linda Goodman. And I read about Libra and Aquarius, and I was reading it to Chris in Telluride that right after we almost died. And I remember crying and going, how does this know me so well? Like this describes us better than I could even do. And that was the turning point for me that got us into astrology. We almost died. And I was like, wow, something outside of myself knows, and like it resonates in the soul level. And that was really me getting comfortable with like feeling the internal world of intuition.
Yeah. And also like looking at your chart and seeing all these different kinds, different lines and like what different things mean. It's sometimes I think horoscopes can feel a little bit hokey, you know, like they're in the back of a newspaper or it's just, you're on a crossword puzzle kind of a, you know, situation. But when you're looking at this, it seems so unique to the specific person. Like you said, it has to do with the city you were born in. It has to do the specific time you were born. I mean, this is different than just like, hey, you're born in
general Libra.
Yeah, like it's going to be very so much more concrete and so much more dialed into what you're like instead of just like what anyone who shares a similar birthday to you is like. This is much more in depth.
Yeah, unfortunately, some astrologers give the rest of us a bad name, but it is like still an introduction into this work that people might not have ever gone deeper into had they not, you know, had that little edutainment
Right.
experience.
I think that, I mean, same with like card reading. Like it seems like culture has created it to be like a gimmick or something bad or dark or whatever. But anybody that has an open heart that comes to me for a reading is blown away. Just like we're sitting here going like, how does it know? Like, I don't like, it's beyond, you know, intuition is knowing beyond logic. And I feel like that's what all of this is tapping into. They're tools to tap into your intuition. So your mind is like, fuck, I don't even know what's happening right now. But your soul is activated and like, oh my gosh, there's some, like it's remembering. That's what all of this enlightenment shit is anyway, is just a remembering. And so I feel like these are just powerful tools to remember even more truth of yourself.
Yes, it's so comforting to know that there's something so much bigger than us and we're not kind of like in chaos. There's like a divine order to it all.
I feel like that should give the control freak some kind of sense of relaxation. Like it is all, the stars have been set. Okay, let me ask you that. So like free will and your cosmic destiny and the planets and the stars, but like, can you change it? Can you shift it? Because, you know, they talk about tarot readings. It's not really set in stone. It's a potential. So is this a potential or is this a set in stone? Can things change and shift? Because like the planets were where they were when you were born. It's not like they're going to be like, oh, well, we'll scoot over because you're having a bad week. You know what I mean? Like, so how does that show up?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, what is plotted out with astrology are energetic experiences. So, there are times that are planned for you to be under enormous pressure. There are times that are planned for you to go through really big breakdowns and breakthroughs. It's just kind of how life is. We each get our turn with it, but the way we choose to deal with it, that's where free will comes in. You choose your vibration essentially. So, like we were saying, like a planet like Pluto is a planet that forces us to face our fears. But when you face your fears, you up level and you're no longer afraid of that thing anymore, which makes you very powerful. So it's really like in how you look at it. And that's why I love to promote a philosophy of like helping people tap into their higher vibrational selves rather than focusing on like what's wrong with you or like here's how you're flawed and broken, because that really is not helpful when we're looking at evolving.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, knowing where your shadow is so that you can embrace it, but also to grow forward. And that's the same for the tarot readings. I'm not trying to like find all the negative stuff. Like, well, how can we shift to find that positive solution?
Yes, definitely.
Is there something that you have that's a daily practice as well? I feel like obviously, you look at the charts, but like, that doesn't seem like something that you would do daily. Is there anything that you do like in the morning or at night or anything like that where it's a part of your like daily rituals?
Yeah, actually, I have a calendar as a part of my membership where you can see all the astrological events that are happening in real time. And it actually does change the mood of the day depending on which moon sign it's going on. Like there's so many different factors. If I showed you my calendar, you'd be like, whoa. So you can actually plan things with astrology. You can know how you're going to feel on certain days. And then how we were talking before about like the custom yearly forecast reports that I do, that's like what's specifically happening for you. So there's the collective energy that we're all going through, and then we have our own individual way that the planets are pinging off of our chart too. So there's like, this is like endless. It goes so, so deep.
That's what's so crazy about the more I study into these like divination tools, I've been reading tarot for 9 years and I'm still like more layers. There's more connections. Now let's add in the tree of life and the Kabbalah, and let's add in astrology. Like all of it is laid on top of this foundational tool. And it's just, it never ends, like the wisdom and the learning, which is kind of interesting. Like, does it end? Like, or is it just so in depth and there is an end? Like, or does it always evolve?
I think we're always evolving because in my spiritual awakenings I've had, I was aware that there's just like always another level.
Mhm.
Even after like we finish this life, there's like, we know we can become spirit guides or ascended masters, and who knows where we go from there. But yeah, I don't think the learning ever stops really, which I love. I'm excited about that.
So, speaking of learning, one thing that I've heard about zodiacs and astrology is that when we incarnate under each sign of the zodiac to gather all of the different qualities. Have you come across that in your studies?
I'm not sure about that. No, I haven't gotten there quite yet, but I'm definitely really interested in the intersection of like past lives and astrology. As far as I've kind of like come to a conclusion about this so far, is that our astrology chart is the culmination of every life we've ever had and who we've become as a result of that. But like, I feel like there's so much that humans cannot grasp as far as like quantum realities and different timelines and things like that. So I feel like astrology is going to be really, really interesting in like another 100 or 200 years. It's just going to keep getting wackier and more awesome.
It's interesting. We were having that exact conversation today about what she was just saying. That's so fascinating.
Yeah, and I have another question too. So let's say that someone is a beginner in this and you have the book coming out, you have a membership club, and you do readings. Where is the best place to start, and what's the best way to go from there?
Yeah, so they're all created for different learning styles and basically based on how deep you want to get into it. Because I don't want it to like anyone to like get scared away because you'll miss out on so many amazing insights. So I would say the book is the best place to start because you can get acquainted with who you are and what you're here to do. And then if you love it a lot, you could dive into my membership where you can learn so much more about how to use astrology in a really easy and practical way in your everyday life. life. It's called the Cosmic Calling Community. But if you don't want to learn astrology and you just want to know, like, what am I supposed to do with my life? Get me out of this situation, or I'm ready to evolve. I know I'm meant for more. I can just give you a reading and you don't have to learn all of it. I can just give you the messages.
I love that. Done for you.
Yeah, a little easier for some people.
I really appreciated the time that we had together and the reading. It was really amazing, and it definitely helped shape, like, I think just having that confirmation, like you said, and that's what all my readings are too, is like, oh yeah, I know you already know this, but let me just remind you one more time. And I feel like having that confirmation just, for some reason, like triples your confidence and clarity of like, yep, this is the direction we're going.
Yes, I think we're so distracted, especially like in these modern times with the internet and all these like waves moving through the air. It's really easy to like forget what you're doing or what you're meant to do. And then we also like get trapped into like the capitalism and patriarchy and old paradigm. And there's just like so many layers that keep us away from ourselves. So I think like it's amazing that we have this tool to tap back in and get realigned and just have it laid out for us so we don't have to question so much.
Yes, everything really is a distraction, like from getting to know ourselves.
Everything.
Oh, so much. It's either a lesson or a distraction. So before we end, I would love for you to share how people can get a hold of this book or learn more about you. I'm always cruising your Instagram. I mean, I check in all the time. Like, where's the planets? Oh, I'm in a bad mood. What day is it? So where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me at soulshineastrology.com or on Instagram at soulshineastrology. And my book is open for pre-order right now. Again, it's called Find Your Cosmic Calling, a guide to discovering your life's work with astrology. You can find it on Amazon. And if you hop back over to my website and go to soulshineastrology.com/book, you can type in your receipt details and you'll get an amazing meditation I made for people who pre-order, which will go through all 12 of your chakras into the upper realms and help you get back in tune with what you're really here to do in that way. And then there's a little workbook that will help you think about what you already know about your calling, so that when the book does arrive, you're kind of like have some references to tie back what you learn about yourself from your chart.
All right, be right back, everyone. I'm going to pre-order because not only is the wisdom going to be on point, but what I'm excited about is how freaking pretty I know this book is going to be. I just love the work you do. It is always so not only beautiful, but meaningful and powerful. And I think when you can combine aesthetics and like authentic quality and depth to it, like that's a win-win in my book. So I'm just so grateful that you have taken the time to share this wisdom with us. And before you go, I would love to ask you one last question. And that is, what does living an elevated life mean to you?
Thank you so much. To me, it means slowing down, being in the present moment and noticing, what am I even doing right now? Because a lot of times we get distracted. So I think like whenever you can slow down and like just notice what you're doing and what you're thinking, you have the key to unlimited potential right there.
I love it. To live an elevated life, you must slow down. Oh, so true. Such deep wisdom. Thank you so much, Natalie, for sharing all of your cosmic knowledge with us here on the Elevated Life podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful.
All right, you guys have to go check her out. Go creep her Instagram and let her know, hey, I just listened to the podcast, and maybe you can get started in checking out your chart. Until then, we'll see you guys next week. Peace. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Elevated Life podcast. Want more? Join us at theelevatedlifeclub.com for mindset upgrades, lifestyle hacks, and spiritual tools to elevate your soul.
Each month features a new masterclass, meditation, yoga practice, and more to help you transform your life one step at a time.
Come join the 7 or Above Club.